This is not an ordinary moment in your life. Something has shifted in this particular season, in this specific stretch of days you are living through right now. And if you have felt it but could not name it, that is exactly why this message exists. There are seasons that carry a different weight than others. There are periods of time that feel charged with something invisible, something pressing, something that makes ordinary Tuesday mornings feel like they are holding a secret just beneath the surface. This is one of those seasons. And you are in the middle of it right now, whether you recognized it before you pressed play or not. Chosen wasn't. This message was not placed in your path by accident. The fact that you are here, listening to these exact words at this exact point in your journey, is not a coincidence, and it is not a small thing. Heaven does not waste moments. Heaven does not scatter messages carelessly across the paths of people who are not ready to receive them. You are here because something inside you has been stirring. Something inside you has been pressing against the surface of your everyday life, asking to be acknowledged, asking to be understood, asking to finally be given a name. And so before anything else, before the teaching, and before the encouragement, and before the promise, let this land first. This season you are in right now is not ordinary. It is not more of the same. It is not a continuation of the chapter you have been living. Something has changed in the atmosphere around your life, and what is coming next is not what came before. Now let me speak to what you have been carrying. Because if you are the one this message is meant for, and I believe you are, then there are certain things you have been experiencing that most people around you have not been able to see or name. The first is this. You have been having moments of unusual clarity, moments where something inside you knows something your circumstances have not yet confirmed. You will be sitting in an ordinary place, doing an ordinary thing, and a thought will pass through you that feels less like your own opinion and more like information being delivered from somewhere else. It is quiet, but it is certain. It arrives without fanfare, and yet it leaves a mark. The second thing you have been experiencing is a growing sense of restlessness that does not respond to distraction. You have tried to quiet it with busyness, with scrolling, with plans, with conversations, and yet it remains. It is not anxiety exactly. It is more like urgency, like something in you knows that time is moving and something important is waiting to begin. The third sign is this. The people and places that used to feel comfortable have begun to feel different. Not wrong necessarily, but different. Like a coat you have outgrown. You still wear it because it is familiar, but something about the fit has changed, and you feel it every time you put it on. Relationships that once felt easy now require more effort. Environments that once felt like home now feel like waiting rooms. The fourth sign is that your dreams have become more vivid and more directive. Not every dream, and not every night, but there have been moments in sleep where something is communicated to you so clearly that you wake up and sit with it, not knowing it meant something. Even if you cannot fully decode it yet, there is a frequency in your sleep that has changed. Something is being transmitted to you in those quiet hours that your waking mind is still catching up to. And the fifth sign, the one that perhaps most clearly marks you as someone who is standing at the threshold of what this message is about, is that you have a deep and unshakable sense that you were built for more than what you are currently living. Not more in the sense of greed or ambition, more in the sense of assignment, more in the sense of calling, more in the sense of a purpose so specific and so personal that no generic success story has ever fully captured what you feel when you imagine the life you were designed to live. Chosen one, you are not imagining these things. You are not being dramatic. You are not confusing wishful thinking for spiritual discernment. What you are sensing is real, and what you are sensing has a name. You are an earth angel, placed in this generation for a purpose that was written before you drew your first breath. You are part of a divine plan so carefully constructed that even the delays, even the detours, even the seasons of silence and confusion have been woven into the design rather than subtracted from it. Heaven has paused everything around you in this moment to deliver this message. The noise of your week, the weight of your responsibilities, the voice of your doubt, all of it has been quieted just long enough for this truth to reach you. And the truth is this: the season of being overlooked is not your permanent address. The season of being underestimated is not your destiny. And the table that God is preparing right now, in the very presence of the people who doubted you, questioned you, dismissed you, and counted you out, that table is being set with your name on it. Not theirs, yours. You have prayed for this. You have cried for this. You have held on through nights when holding on felt impossible. And you have shown up again the next morning, even when showing up cost you more than anyone around you will ever know. That faithfulness has not gone unnoticed. It has not evaporated into the air. It has been building something. It has been preparing something. It has been positioning something that is now, in this season, in these very days, beginning to move. Your honor is about to be seen, not by the people who already celebrated you, by the ones who didn't. Heaven did not say soon. Heaven said now. There is something that happens to a person who has been waiting a long time. It is not something that shows up in their face right away, and it is not something they announce to the people around them. It is quieter than that. It lives in the pauses between sentences. It lives in the half-second before they answer a question about how things are going. It lives in the way they have learned, over months and years, to manage the distance between what they feel and what they show. And if you have been in a long season of waiting, a season where the promise felt real but the evidence felt absent, then you know exactly what I am describing. You have become fluent in a language that most people around you have never had to learn. The language of holding on without proof, the language of believing without confirmation, the language of carrying something sacred inside you, while the outside world gives you very little reason to keep carrying it. I want to name what you have been feeling. Not in general terms, not in the comfortable, softened language that makes everyone feel included, but no one feel truly seen. I want to name it specifically because you deserve to have someone speak directly to what has actually been happening inside you during this season. The first thing you have been feeling is a sudden and unexpected wave of grief about the past. It comes without warning. You could be driving, or washing dishes, or lying in bed on a perfectly unremarkable evening, and something surfaces. A memory, a version of yourself from years ago, a moment where a different choice was made, or where a door closed that you had believed was going to open. And with that memory comes a grief that surprises you with its freshness, as though no time has passed at all. You wonder sometimes why it still hurts like this. You wonder if something is wrong with you for not being further along in the healing. But nothing is wrong with you. What you are experiencing is the soul's way of acknowledging what was real. Grief this persistent is not weakness. It is evidence that what you lost actually mattered, and that you are someone who understood the value of what you were given and what was taken. The second thing you have been feeling is that the familiar has started to feel foreign. People you have known for years, places you used to find comfort in, routines that used to feel grounding, they have begun to carry a strange weight. You walk into rooms that used to feel like home, and something in you stands slightly apart from them now. You sit at tables with people who love you, and yet feel in some quiet interior place alone. This is disorienting. It makes you question yourself. You wonder if you are becoming cold, or disconnected, or ungrateful. But that is not what is happening. What is happening is that you are being prepared to leave a season, and the spirit in you already knows it, even when your mind and your circumstances have not yet caught up. When a place starts to feel too small, it is not because you have become arrogant. It is because you have grown. The third sign is that you have been having recurring experiences around a specific image or theme, the sense of a door that has not yet opened. It may come in dreams, a door at the end of a hallway that you never quite reach. It may come in waking thoughts, a persistent sense that something is just on the other side of where you currently stand, close enough to almost touch but still just out of reach. This image is not tormenting you for no reason. It is not your imagination being cruel. That door is real. And the reason it appears to you again and again is because your spirit is already oriented toward it. You are not wandering. You are waiting at the right door. The fourth sign is that the same message has been finding you through different sources. A stranger says something that sounds like it was taken directly from your private prayers. A song lyric catches you off guard with its precision. A passage in a book falls open to exactly the page you needed. A video appears in your feed that speaks to the exact question you have been sitting with for weeks. This is not coincidence. This is not the brain's tendency to notice patterns. This is something older and more deliberate than either of those explanations. When the same message arrives through many different doors, it is because the message is meant for you, and heaven is making sure you do not miss it. Now I want to speak to the pain that sits underneath all of these signs. The insomnia that comes not from anxiety about tasks, but from a soul that is too activated to rest. The loneliness that persists even in rooms full of people who care about you, because the specific kind of understanding you need has not yet found you. The feeling of having been wronged, not in a bitter way, but in a quiet, private way that you have mostly kept to yourself. The awareness that certain people did not treat you the way your effort and your character deserved. And the feeling of being misunderstood, of the depth of what you carry, reduced to a surface-level reading by people who did not take the time to see further. These are real. I am not going to wrap them in encouraging language too quickly, because they deserve to be acknowledged first. You have carried these things. You have carried them with more grace than most people will ever know, and the grace with which you have carried them does not mean they have not been heavy. But now I want to offer you a reframe, not to dismiss the pain, but to change the lens through which you understand the season that produced it. What if the waiting was never punishment? What if every closed door, every delayed answer, every season of silence from heaven was not heaven turning away from you, but heaven turning toward you with a level of attention and intention that requires stillness to receive? There is a profound difference between being overlooked and being positioned. When you are overlooked, you are forgotten. When you are positioned, you are being placed with purpose. The two can feel identical from the inside. The silence feels the same. The waiting feels the same. The ache feels the same. But the outcomes are entirely different. One leads nowhere. The other leads to exactly where you were always supposed to be. You have not been overlooked. You have been positioned. And there is a difference, too, between being abandoned and being protected. When you look back at the relationships that ended, the opportunities that did not come through, the paths that closed before you could walk down them, I want you to consider the possibility that some of what felt like loss was actually covering. Some of what felt like rejection was redirection. Some of what felt like being left behind was actually being held back from something that was not designed to carry your name. You were not abandoned in this season. You were protected in it. If you are hearing this, and something in your chest is recognizing it, if something in you is saying, yes, that is exactly it, that is exactly what I have been living through, then I want you to type one word in the comments right now. Type the word ready. Not because it is a transaction, not because it unlocks anything, but because there is power in declaration. There is something that shifts when you move what is internal into the external. When you take what has only lived in your private experience and give it a public voice, even a small one, even in a comment section. Type ready if this season is the one you have been living. And if this message has reached you at a moment when you needed it, if these words have named something that has been sitting unnamed inside you for longer than you can remember, I want to gently ask you to consider supporting this work. Not for my benefit, but because messages like this one cost something to make and cost something to keep in the world. There are people sitting in their cars right now, in their quiet kitchens, in their bedrooms at 2 in the morning, who need to hear exactly what you just heard. And the only way this message finds them is if people who have been touched by it decide that it is worth keeping alive. If you are able to contribute, even a small amount, through the donation link in the description below, you are not giving to a channel. You are investing in the next person who is about to have their season named for them. You are funding the moment when someone else hears the words they have needed to hear and finally feels less alone. That is what your generosity makes possible. Like this video if it has spoken to something real in you. Share it with one person who is in a waiting season and has not yet found the language for it. Subscribe so that when the next message arrives, it finds you. These are small actions, but they carry weight. They are how a message meant for one person becomes a message that reaches 10,000, and then 100,000, and then finds the exact person sitting somewhere in the world who needed it most. You are not alone in this season, and the proof of that is the fact that right now, in this moment, someone else who has carried exactly what you have carried is listening to these same words and feeling exactly what you are feeling. You are in a room together, even if you cannot see each other, and that room is larger than you think. The waiting is being redefined right now, not as punishment, not as neglect, not as evidence that you were forgotten or passed over or not enough. The waiting is being revealed as positioning, and the position you have been placed in, quietly, carefully, with more precision than you have allowed yourself to believe, is one that is about to become visible. Your season is turning, and the turn has already begun. There is a moment in every long season where the encouragement, as beautiful as it is, begins to feel like it needs somewhere to land. You have heard the promises. You have received the reminders that you are not forgotten. You have nodded along to the truth that your season is turning, and something in you has believed it, at least partially, at least in the moments when the words were fresh. But then the words fade, and the morning comes, and you are standing in your kitchen, or sitting at your desk, or lying in the dark again, and the question that rises is not whether the promise is true. The question is, what do I do with my hands while I wait for it to arrive? That question is not a sign of weak faith. That question is a sign of a person who is ready to participate. And participation is exactly what this part of the message is about. Because here is what I have come to understand about the way divine timing works in a human life. It does not operate on passivity. It does not reward the person who simply endures and waits and wishes. It moves toward the person who has learned to align themselves with what is coming, who has developed the internal posture that makes them ready to receive what they have been asking for. And that alignment is not complicated. It does not require years of study or a particular religious background or a level of spiritual achievement that feels permanently out of reach. It requires practice, specific, repeatable, daily practice that trains the inner life the same way exercise trains the body. What I am about to give you is not a philosophy. It is a protocol. It is something you can do today in whatever space you are in, with whatever time you have available. It has 3 steps, and each step builds on the one before it. Together, they create a 7-minute daily practice that has the potential to change the frequency at which your mind and spirit are operating, which in turn changes what you are able to receive, recognize, and respond to in your daily life. I want you to take this seriously without making it heavy. The best practices are the ones that feel like they belong to you, the ones you return to not out of obligation, but because something in you knows what they are doing, even when your mind cannot fully explain it. So approach what follows with openness rather than pressure. You do not need to do this perfectly. You need to do it honestly. The tool that this protocol is built around is something I am calling the 7-minute return. It is a practice of deliberate inner alignment, a daily act of tuning yourself to the frequency of what you are believing for, rather than the frequency of what you are currently experiencing. It does not require any equipment, any special environment, any particular time of day. It requires only you, 7 minutes, and a willingness to be honest with yourself in a way that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Step 1 is this. Before anything else, before the second step, and before the 7 minutes of silence, you are going to do something that sounds simple, but is actually one of the most spiritually sophisticated acts a human being can perform. You are going to remember something you are grateful for that did not happen, not something good that came to you. Something bad that was kept from you. Something that could have gone wrong and did not. Something that could have destroyed you and did not. Something that you almost walked into and were, by some grace you did not fully understand at the time, held back from. This is harder than gratitude for good things, because gratitude for good things is easy to feel and easy to name. But gratitude for the protected path, for the relationship that did not work out, because it would have cost you something you cannot afford to lose, for the opportunity that fell through, because it would have taken you further from your purpose rather than toward it, for the door that stayed closed because was behind it was not designed to carry your name. That kind of gratitude requires a deeper seeing. It requires you to look at your history, not only for what was given, but for what was withheld with intention. Take 2 minutes for this step. Sit with it. Do not rush past it to get to the feeling of it. Let the memory surface of something that did not happen, something that you may have grieved at the time, something that may have felt like loss or rejection or failure, and allow yourself to see it from the other side. Allow yourself to consider that the closed door was not abandonment but protection, that the no was not rejection but redirection, that the loss was not subtraction but preservation. When you find it, and you will find it if you sit with the question long enough, let the gratitude come. Not performed gratitude, not the kind you say out loud to seem spiritually mature. The quiet, interior kind that shifts something in your chest when it arrives. That shift is real. That shift is your nervous system releasing a pattern of interpretation that has been keeping you oriented toward lack rather than toward provision. That shift is the first step of the alignment. Step 2 is a declaration. and it is connected to the concept of time that this entire message is built around. After you have found your gratitude for what did not happen, you are going to speak this statement out loud. Or if you are in a place where speaking out loud is not possible, you are going to write it. The statement is this: I am not behind. I am not early. I am exactly where the appointed time requires me to be, and what has been prepared for me is already complete and waiting. I want you to understand why this statement matters. Because most of us are operating beneath the surface of our daily lives, from a time orientation that is fundamentally broken. We are measuring our progress against a clock that was never designed for the kind of life we are living. We look at our peers and we calculate. We look at our age and we calculate. We look at where we thought we would be by now and we subtract where we actually are. And the result of that calculation is always the same. It always produces the feeling of being behind, of being late, of having missed something that cannot be recovered. But that calculation is using the wrong measurement system entirely. And the statement you are about to declare is not a denial of your reality. It is a refusal to let the wrong measurement system define your position. It is an act of choosing a different framework. One that we will explore more deeply later in this message, one that understands time not as a linear race with winners and losers, but as a sacred architecture with appointed moments and prepared seasons. Speak the statement. Mean it as much as you can, and when the part of you that is still oriented toward the old measurement system pushes back, when the voice inside says, "But what about the years? But what about what I have lost? But what about how far behind I actually am?" Do not argue with that voice. Simply acknowledge it and return to the statement. The practice is not in silencing the doubt. The practice is in choosing the declaration in spite of the doubt. That is what makes it powerful. That is what makes it a training rather than a performance. This step takes approximately 1 minute. 2 minutes if the resistance is strong and you need to return to the statement more than once. Step 3 is where the practice deepens into something that operates below the level of language and thought. After your gratitude and after your declaration, you are going to enter 7 minutes of deliberate silence. Not silence in the sense of trying to think of nothing. Not silence in the sense of meditation as a performance or a discipline you have to achieve. Silence in the sense of permission. Permission to stop producing and simply receive. Permission to stop talking to yourself about what is wrong and what needs to be fixed and what is still missing, and instead to simply be present in your own interior space without an agenda. For most people, 7 minutes of this kind of silence feels much longer than 7 minutes. That is normal. The mind is accustomed to filling every available space with content, and when you remove the content, the first response is discomfort. Let the discomfort be there. It is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is a sign that you are reaching a layer of yourself that does not often get to breathe. During these 7 minutes, if a thought arises, let it pass without following it. If an emotion surfaces, acknowledge it without analyzing it. If nothing seems to happen at all, understand that something is still happening at a level below what you can consciously observe. The practice is not about having an experience. It is about creating a consistent condition in which a certain kind of receiving becomes possible. 7 minutes. Every day. After your gratitude and after your declaration, the cumulative effect of this practice, done consistently over days and then weeks, is not subtle. People who commit to it describe a gradual but unmistakable shift in how they see their circumstances. Not because their circumstances have necessarily changed, but because the lens through which they interpret their circumstances has been retrained. Problems that felt insurmountable begin to reveal possible paths. Patterns that felt permanent begin to show signs of movement. And perhaps most significantly, the sense of divine presence that so many people in long seasons of waiting have felt growing faint begins to return. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, like a signal being tuned into clarity after years of static. That 7-minute silence is also where the science and the spiritual begin to speak to each other. And in the next part of this message, I am going to tell you exactly what is happening inside the brain during those 7 minutes, and why the frequency at which you operate is not fixed, and why what you have been doing in that silence is more powerful than you may have allowed yourself to believe. But before we go there, I want you to commit to something, not a purchase, not a subscription, a practice. 7 minutes today, not tomorrow, not after you have had a better week or found a better time or felt more spiritually prepared. Today, in whatever condition you are in whatever space you are occupying, 7 minutes of gratitude, declaration, and silence. That is step 1 into the season that is already beginning to open for you. Something has been true about you for longer than you have had language for it. There is a frequency you carry, not a metaphor, not a poetic way of describing personality or temperament, but an actual, measurable biological frequency that runs through the neural architecture of your brain and determines, with more precision than most people are ever told, what you are able to access, what you are able to create, what you are able to perceive, and what you are able to receive. And the reason this matters, the reason it is relevant to everything this message has been building toward, is that the frequency most people are operating on by the time they reach adulthood is not the frequency they were born with. It is not the frequency they were designed to sustain. And it is not the frequency that matches what heaven has been preparing for them. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. And before you dismiss that as too scientific or too far removed from the spiritual conversation we have been having, I want you to stay with me, because what I am about to share with you is the bridge between the identity you have been awakening to and the neuroscience that confirms it is not imagination. For decades, the dominant assumption in brain research was that the adult brain was largely fixed, that the patterns established in childhood and early development were essentially permanent, that you were, in terms of your cognitive and creative capacity, more or less the person you were going to be. This assumption shaped education, shaped medicine, shaped the way entire generations understood their own potential. And it was wrong. What researchers have discovered through steady and increasingly precise measurement is that the brain is far more responsive to external and internal frequency than previously understood. The brain does not simply produce waves passively. It entrains to them. It synchronizes with them. It reorganizes itself around them. And the specific frequencies associated with the highest states of human cognition, creativity, intuition, and what many people describe as spiritual clarity, those frequencies are not the exclusive property of a gifted few. They are available, they are accessible, and they can be cultivated. The person who has dedicated more than 30 years of his life to understanding exactly how this works is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers. Trained at MIT, with research affiliations that have included work connected to NASA studies on human cognitive performance. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of 3 decades asking a question that most of his colleagues considered too ambitious to be practical. The question was this: if the brain can be entrained to a specific frequency from the outside, what is the minimum effective dose? What is the smallest amount of time Using the most precisely calibrated audio input, that would be sufficient to shift a person's dominant brainwave state in a way that produces lasting, measurable change. The answer that emerged from thousands of days of research and refinement was 7 minutes, not 70, not 17, 7. And the reason 7 minutes works, rather than requiring hours of daily practice or years of meditation training, is rooted in how the brain responds to a specific type of audio technology called brainwave entrainment. The mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. When the ears receive two slightly different audio frequencies simultaneously, one in each ear, the brain does not simply hear two tones. It perceives the mathematical difference between them and begins to produce a third frequency internally, a frequency that corresponds to that difference. This is called a binaural beat. And when that internally generated frequency falls within the theta range, between 4 and 8 cycles per second, something remarkable begins to happen in the brain. Theta waves are the frequency of deep creativity, rapid learning, intuitive knowing, and what neuroscientists describe as the hypnagogic state, the threshold between waking and sleeping, where the brain is simultaneously relaxed and extraordinarily receptive. Children spend a significant portion of their waking hours in theta. It is one of the reasons children learn language, movement, and complex social patterns at a speed that adults find almost impossible to replicate. The theta state is not a mystical concept. It is a documented, measurable condition of the brain that most adults have largely lost access to. Not because it has been taken from them permanently, but because the conditions of adult life, the stress, the noise, the constant demand for analytical processing, gradually push the brain into higher frequency states that are useful for managing daily tasks, but deeply unfriendly to the kind of open, receptive, creative processing that theta enables. And then there is gamma. Gamma waves are the highest frequency brain state that has been meaningfully studied, operating above 30 cycles per second, and in some cases significantly higher. Gamma is associated with what researchers call binding, the process by which the brain integrates information from multiple regions simultaneously to produce sudden insight, the experience of seeing how everything connects at once. These are the eureka moments, the breakthroughs, the sudden clarity that arrives after a long period of confusion, the creative leaps that seem to come from nowhere, but are actually the product of a brain that has been primed to integrate at a high level. Gamma is the frequency of the highest human performance. It is the frequency that lights up in the brains of experienced meditators, in the moments of peak creative output, in the experiences that people describe as flow states, as divine inspiration, as the moment when they knew exactly what they were supposed to do and exactly how to do it. The genius wave works by using precisely calibrated audio, including binaural beats and isochronic tones, to guide the brain from its habitual waking state through theta and into the conditions that allow gamma to emerge. 7 minutes is the window, not because it is arbitrary, but because Dr. Rivers' research identified it as the threshold point at which the brain's entrainment response is sufficient to produce a measurable shift without causing the fatigue that longer sessions can generate. It is the minimum effective dose of a technology that has been refined over decades to deliver maximum neurological impact in minimum time. And the 7 minutes of silence you committed to at the end of part 3 was not incidental. It was the beginning of this process already working in you. Now I want to tell you about someone who's sat in almost exactly the position you are sitting in right now. Her name was Denise, and she came to the Genius Wave not through a polished testimonial, but through genuine desperation. She had been in a season of professional stagnation for nearly 4 years. She was competent. Her colleagues knew it. But something about the way her ideas were received in meetings, the way her contributions were consistently credited to others, the way she worked harder than anyone around her and remained somehow invisible to the people making decisions, had worn her down to a place of quiet defeat. She was not dramatic about it. She had simply begun to believe that this was the ceiling, that the version of herself she had imagined at 25 was a fantasy that the real world had gently but firmly corrected. She began the 7-minute practice on a Wednesday evening, alone in her apartment, feeling more skeptical than hopeful. She did not experience a dramatic breakthrough that first night, or the second. But by the end of the second week, she noticed something she described as a quieting of the internal noise that had been running constantly in the background of her mind for years. She said it was like a radio that had always been playing static, had been turned down just enough for her to hear something else underneath it. By week 3, she was waking up with ideas, not vague impressions, but specific, actionable, creative solutions to problems she had been circling for months. She brought one of those ideas to a meeting. It was received differently than her ideas had been received before. She could not explain exactly what had changed, whether it was the idea itself, or the confidence with which she presented it, or something in the room's response to her energy. But something had shifted. 3 months later, she was leading the project she had pitched. 6 months after that, she was offered a position that redefined her trajectory entirely. Denise is not unique. She is one of more than 19,000 people who have used the genius wave and experienced results that their previous circumstances gave them no reason to expect. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I would be thinking it too. You are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and you are right. It is not nothing. It is a real amount of money, and for some of you listening to this, it represents a decision rather than a default. I want to honor that. I am not going to minimize the weight of spending money on something you have not yet experienced, particularly in a season where resources may already feel stretched thin. What I will say is this: the question is not whether $39 is significant. The question is what you would pay for the quieting of the noise. What you would pay for the return of the creativity that your circumstances have been slowly suffocating. What you would pay for 7 minutes a day of a practice that has the documented capacity to shift the frequency at which your brain is operating, which in turn shifts what you are able to see, build, create, and receive in your daily life. The regular price for the Genius Wave is $49. Today, through the single link in the pinned comment below this video, it is available for $39. That price includes lifetime access to the 7-minute audio, which means you pay once and the practice is yours permanently. It also comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means that if you use it consistently for 3 months and you do not experience a meaningful shift, you get every dollar returned to you without question and without difficulty. One important note: the Genius Wave has been replicated by others who are selling inferior versions through unauthorized channels. The only legitimate source is the single link in the pinned comment below. That is the only place where you will receive the genuine, correctly calibrated audio that Dr. Rivers' research produced. Anywhere else is a risk I do not recommend you take with something as sensitive and important as your own neurological health and spiritual alignment. This offer is not permanent. The $39 price point is available for a limited time and to a limited number of people because the infrastructure that supports the distribution at this price has a ceiling. When that ceiling is reached, the price returns to $49. I do not say that to pressure you. I say it because if you have been feeling throughout this message that something about what is being offered here is meant for you, then the window in which to act on that feeling is now, not later, not after you have thought about it for a few more days. The prepared person recognizes the door when it opens, and your door is open right now. Before we move forward, I need to stay here for a moment. Because what was just described in the previous part of this message, the science, the practice, the possibility of what is coming, all of it is real and all of it is available to you. But I am aware that for some of you, the invitation to step into something new carries with it a weight that has nothing to do with skepticism and everything to do with the cost of the years that came before it. And that cost deserves to be named before we go any further, not reframed, not softened, not wrapped in encouraging language that moves too quickly past the reality of what those years actually took from you. Because here is the truth that most messages in this space are afraid to say out loud. The waiting cost you something. It did not cost you nothing. It did not pass through your life like weather that leaves no mark. It landed. It accumulated. It took things from you that were real and valuable, and in some cases irreplaceable. And the fact that something good is coming does not erase the reality of what was lost while you were waiting for it to arrive. I want to name what was taken, not to keep you anchored in grief, but because you have been carrying the weight of these losses mostly in private, mostly without acknowledgement, and there is something that needs to happen in a person before they can fully step into what is next. That something is the honest naming of what the season cost. Not the minimized version, not the version you tell people when they ask how you are doing. The real version, the first thing the years of waiting took, was relationships that could have been built but were not. Not because you did not want them, but because the season you were in did not leave the kind of space that deep relationship requires. When you are in survival mode, when you are managing the gap between where you are and where you know you are supposed to be, when you are carrying a quiet grief that you cannot fully explain to the people around you, the energy required for genuine intimacy gets redirected. You show up. You are present. But the version of you that shows up is the managed version, the version that has learned to function within the constraints of a painful season. Not the full version, not the open version, not the version that has the freedom to be known completely. And the relationships that might have formed around that fuller version of you, the friendships that might have gone deeper, the love that might have had more room to grow, they were shaped by the limitations of the season rather than the fullness of who you actually are. That is a real loss, and you are allowed to grieve it. The second thing the years of waiting took was the forward momentum of your vocation. Your career, your calling, your creative work, whatever form your purpose takes in the practical world, it could have gone further by now. Not because you were not working, you were working. In many cases, you were working harder than the people around you who seemed to be moving faster and reaching further with less apparent effort. But there is a difference between the work a person does when they are operating from their full frequency and the work a person does when they are operating from a depleted, discouraged, constantly second-guessing version of themselves. The waiting affected the quality of your output, not because you became less capable, but because the conditions of the season were not designed to bring out your best. They were designed to test your faithfulness, and you were faithful. But faithfulness in a hard season does not always produce the same visible results as confidence in an open season. And the gap between where your work is now and where it could have been if the season had opened sooner. That gap is real. You are allowed to acknowledge it. The third thing the waiting took was the freedom to speak your biggest dreams out loud. Do you remember when you used to do that? Do you remember a version of yourself that could describe the life you were imagining without immediately hedging, without immediately softening to be the vision to protect yourself from the disappointment of wanting something that might not come? At some point in the season, you learned to hold the dream more quietly. You learned to keep it in the interior space rather than the exterior one, because experience had taught you that speaking it out loud before it arrived created a vulnerability you could not always afford. And so the dream became a private thing, a thing you knew was real, but had learned not to perform publicly. And something about that enforced privacy, that learned withholding of your own vision, took a specific kind of joy from you. The joy of shared anticipation, the joy of being known for what you are moving toward rather than only for what you have already achieved. That was taken, and it mattered. The fourth thing, and this one is perhaps the most tender of all, is that the waiting took portions of your faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, or at least not permanently, but your faith in your own perception. There were moments in this season where you heard something, felt something, knew something with a clarity that surprised you, and then watched as the circumstances around you seemed to contradict what you had heard and felt and known. And after enough of those moments, a quiet erosion began. Not a dramatic loss of belief, but a gradual dimming of the confidence with which you trusted your own interior knowing. You began to add more disclaimers to your certainties. You began to hold your convictions a little more loosely, not because you became wiser, but because the season had trained you to protect yourself from the pain of being wrong. And that erosion, that quiet loss of self-trust, is one of the most significant things a long waiting season can take from a person. Because your interior knowing is not a luxury. It is the instrument through which divine guidance reaches you. When it has been eroded, the signal gets harder to read. I am not moving past these losses quickly. I am sitting with them, and I am asking you to sit with them too, not in despair, but in honest acknowledgement. Because what you are about to step into deserves to be entered by the whole you. Not the version of you that has learned to perform okayness, but the version that can say clearly and without shame, "This cost me something real, and I am bringing that reality with me as I step forward." There is a man in the ancient story whose name you know. His name was Joseph, and I am not going to tell you the part of his story that ends in the palace, because that part gets told too quickly and too easily, and it skips over the weight of what came before it. I want to stay in the middle of Joseph's story for a moment. I want to stay in the years when his brothers had sold him, when he had been taken to a foreign land, when he had served faithfully in a household that was not his own, and then been falsely accused and imprisoned for something he did not do. I want to stay in the years when the dreams he had been given as a young man must have felt in the darkness of that prison, like they belonged to someone else's life, like they had been given to the wrong person, or given at the wrong time, or given in a language he had somehow misread. Joseph did not know in those years that the prison was a preparation. He did not know that the specific suffering of that season, the false accusation, the confinement, the years of waiting on a promise that showed no sign of arriving, was building in him exactly the character that the palace would require. He only knew what the season felt like from the inside, and from the inside, it felt like loss. It felt like cost. It felt like the accumulation of things taken that had not yet been replaced. I am not telling you this to say that your suffering is secretly good, or that the Cost of the years does not matter because something better is coming. I am telling you this because Joseph's story confirms something that your own story is also confirming, even if you cannot see the confirmation clearly yet. The cost was real. The loss was real. The years in the prison were real years with real weight and real pain and real confusion. And they were also, at the same time, a preparation so precise and so purposeful that nothing Joseph experienced in the palace would have been possible without them. Your losses are real. Your costs are real. The relationships, the career momentum, the freedom to dream out loud, the faith in your own perception, all of it was genuinely taken and genuinely matters. And at the same time, every single one of those losses has been working on you in ways that you are only beginning to understand. The character built in the silence, the depth forged in the confusion, the compassion developed through the pain of being misunderstood, the wisdom earned through the years of watching and waiting and holding on. You are not coming to what is next empty-handed. You are coming to it carrying everything the season produced in you. And what the season produced in you is exactly what the next chapter requires. The cost was real, and it was not wasted. Not a single day of it. Hold both of those things at once. Let them exist together without forcing one to cancel the other. The grief and the gratitude, the loss and the preparation, cost and the purpose. Because the person you have become inside this season, the person who can hold grief and faith in the same hand without dropping either one, that person is precisely who is needed for what comes next. And what comes next is already in motion. There is a kind of understanding that only becomes available when you have lived long enough inside a painful season to stop demanding that it make sense on your terms. It is the understanding that arrives not through argument or explanation, but through a shift in the framework through which you are interpreting your experience. And that is what this part of the message is about. Not more encouragement layered on top of the same broken framework. A genuinely different framework. One that is ancient enough to have been tested by every kind of human suffering, and wise enough to still be standing after all of it. Before I give you that framework, I want to acknowledge where you are right now in this message. You have just sat with the cost of the years. You have allowed the losses to be named without rushing past them. And there may be a part of you that is wondering whether acknowledgement of the cost is enough, whether naming the pain does anything to change it, whether sitting with the grief of what the season took actually moves you any closer to what the season was preparing you for. That is a fair question. And the answer is yes, but not because naming the pain is magic. Because naming the pain accurately is the first step toward interpreting it correctly. And when you interpret your season correctly, everything changes. Not the circumstances, the meaning. And meaning, it turns out, is one of the most powerful forces available to a human being in a difficult season. There is also something else I want to say before we go into the frameworks themselves. The fact that you are still in this message, still listening, still present after everything that has been named and acknowledged and invited in the previous parts, that tells me you are someone whose hunger for genuine understanding is greater than your hunger for simple comfort. And that hunger is itself a sign. It is the hunger of a person who is ready for a framework that actually holds the full weight of their experience, rather than a framework that requires them to minimize the weight in order to fit inside it. What I am about to give you will hold the full weight. It was designed to. So let me give you two ancient frameworks that have the capacity to completely reinterpret what you have been living through. Not as denial, not as spiritual bypassing, as a genuine and tested lens through which your experience, when viewed through it, reveals a truth that your current framework has been obscuring. The first framework comes from the ancient Greek distinction between two entirely different kinds of time. The Greeks had two separate words for time, and the fact that most modern languages collapsed them into a single word is one of the reasons so many people in this generation are suffering from a confusion that did not need to happen. When you only have one word for time, you only have one way of measuring your life. And when that single measurement system produces the feeling of being behind, of having lost too much, of being too far from where you should be by now, there is no alternative framework available to challenge that calculation. You are left with the math, and the math is brutal. The first Greek word was chronos. Chronos is the time you already know intimately and painfully. It is the time on your phone, and the time on your wall, and the time that measures your age against the ages of the people around you, and produces, with clockwork reliability, the feeling of comparison and deficit. Chronos is sequential, measurable, and entirely indifferent to the quality of what is happening inside its passage. It does not care what you were building during those years. It only counts them. When you measure your season in chronos, the math always produces the same result, regardless of what you were doing while the clock was running. You are behind. You started too late. You lost too many years. You are further from the destination than you should be. At this point on the timeline, chronos is a merciless framework for a person in a waiting season because it measures only quantity and never quality. It counts the years without asking what the years were assembling. It measures the distance without accounting for the terrain. It calculates the gap between then, where you are, and where you thought you would be without any consideration of whether where you thought you would be was actually where you were supposed to go. Chronos is not wrong about what it measures. It is simply measuring the wrong thing entirely. The second Greek word was kairos, and kairos is something so fundamentally different from chronos that placing them side by side is almost like placing two objects from entirely different categories next to each other and calling them the same type of thing. Kairos is not the measurement of duration. It is the recognition of appointed arrival. In the ancient Greek understanding, Kairos referred to the supreme and right moment, the moment when conditions have aligned with a precision that makes what was not previously possible suddenly not only possible but inevitable. Kairos is the moment of convergence, the moment when preparation meets opportunity in a space that was specifically designed to receive them both. Here is why this distinction changes everything for you specifically. When you measure your life in chronos, the years of waiting are evidence of delay, of something having gone wrong, of a gap between where you are and where you should be. But when you measure your life in kairos, those same years are not delay at all. They are the specific and necessary preparation for an appointed moment that required exactly that amount of preparation, and not one day less. The waiting was not behind the schedule. The waiting was the schedule. And the moment you are now approaching, the season that this message has been pointing toward from the very beginning, is not late by chronos standards. It is precisely and exactly on time by kairos standards, which are the only standards that actually govern the kind of story you are living. Let me say that again because it deserves to land fully before we move on. You are not behind. You have never been behind. You have been in preparation for a kairos moment, an appointed arrival, a convergence of conditions that has been assembling itself with a precision and an intentionality that far exceeds anything you could have engineered through your own effort and strategy. And that moment is not somewhere in the distant future requiring more years of patience and faithfulness before it arrives. It is in the season you are currently standing in. The kairos of your life is not coming. It is here. And I want to be careful to name something important about the nature of kairos, because there is a way of hearing this that can accidentally become a performance framework. A way of thinking that says if only I believe enough, or if only I do enough, or if only I hold on faithfully enough, then I will earn my kairos moment. That is not what kairos means. Kairos is not a reward for your performance. It is not something you achieve through sufficient faithfulness. It is an appointment. It was set before you understood what it was. It was ordained before the season of waiting began. And your arrival at it is not the product of having done enough. It is the product of having been positioned by something greater than your own effort into the exact place where the appointed moment is opening. This is not a reward for your faithfulness. This is the fulfillment of an appointment that was made before you fully understood what you were being prepared for. The distinction matters enormously because one framework produces striving and the other produces receiving. And the posture of the open season is receiving, not striving. The second framework I want to give you comes from a concept that speaks directly to the theme of honor that this entire message has been carrying since the title was first spoken. It is the concept of the appointed time, drawn from the ancient understanding that exists in Hebrew wisdom literature, the understanding that there is a specific, ordained, heaven-set moment for every promise that has been spoken over a life. Not a general, vague, sometime in the future moment. A specific, precise, already determined moment at which the promise moves from the invisible realm of what has been ordained into the visible realm of what can be witnessed, experienced, and testified to. The ancient text that carries this concept most powerfully speaks of a vision appointed for an appointed time. It says that even if it seems slow, even if the days and the years pass and the evidence of its coming remains invisible to the natural eye, it will surely come, and it will not delay. Not delay in the chronos sense of arriving later than expected. Delay in the kairos sense of arriving precisely when the appointment was set. What looks like delay from inside chronos is simply the gap between the moment of the promise and the moment of the appointed arrival. And that gap is not empty. That gap is the preparation. That gap is the assembling. That gap is the braiding of the rope that will be strong enough to hold what the appointed moment releases. Think about what this means for the specific shape of your story. The thing you have been believing for. The promise that has felt true in your interior, knowing even when the exterior evidence seemed to contradict it at every turn. The vision of your life that has been clear enough inside you to sustain your hope through the long season, but not yet clear enough outside you for the people around you to see it. That promise was not given to you randomly. It was given to you because there is an appointed time for its fulfillment. And the appointed time is governed not by your circumstances, and not by the cooperation of the people around you, and not by the alignment of market conditions or social factors, or any of the other external variables that Chronos thinking would require to line up before the promise could be fulfilled. It is governed only by the one who set the appointment, and what that one has ordained. Delay cannot cancel. Let that sentence sit in you for a moment without immediately moving past it. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. Not the years of waiting, not the seasons of silence, not the moments when the evidence seemed to point so decisively in the opposite direction of the promise that you wondered if you had misheard it. Not the people who told you it was not going to happen, not the circumstances that seemed to confirm their assessment, None of it has the authority to cancel what has been ordained. The appointment stands, and the appointed time is this season. Your honor is not a distant possibility, contingent on circumstances finally cooperating. Your honor is an ordained outcome moving towards you with the same certainty as the sunrise. You do not need to earn it. You do not need to fight for it. You do not need to convince the right people or engineer the right situations, or finally achieve the level of performance that makes you worthy of being seen. You need only to remain aligned with the appointed time, which means staying present in the season you are in rather than living in your head in the season you are afraid you might never reach. The table being prepared in the presence of your enemies is not a future event to be hoped for. It is a present reality being assembled in the realm that precedes the visible. And when it becomes visible, and it will become visible, the people who doubted you will not have the language for what they are witnessing, because what God prepares for a chosen one who has held on through the appointed season always exceeds the imagination of the people who decided too early that the appointed time was never coming. Hold both of these frameworks together now. Kairos and the appointed time, the right moment and the ordained fulfillment. When you hold them side by side, something becomes unmistakably clear. You were never behind. The promise was never in jeopardy. The silence was never abandonment. And the table that is being set right now, in this season, in these very days, with your name on it, in the presence of everyone who said your name did not belong there, that table was always coming. The appointment was always this moment, and you are standing in it right now. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel, and your honor is about to be seen. Something is already moving. I need you to understand that before anything else in this part of the message, because the shift that is coming in your life is not a future event that you are hoping will one day arrive. It is a present reality that is already in motion beneath the surface of what you can currently see. The ground has already shifted. The assembly is already complete. The Kairos moment is already open. What remains now is not more waiting. What remains is the recognition of what is moving, the willingness to name it without shrinking from it, and the wisdom to know what not to do while the movement is happening. Because there is a specific kind of danger that exists in the transition between a long season of waiting and the opening of what comes next. It is not the danger of failure. It is not the danger of the promise being revoked. It is the danger of the person who has been trained by a long season of disappointment to distrust the very thing they have been praying for. The danger of standing at the open door and finding reasons to hesitate. The danger of feeling something shift in the atmosphere around your life and immediately looking for the catch, the condition, the hidden clause that will explain why this is not actually what it looks like. You have been trained to protect yourself by the years of waiting. That training was necessary and it served you. But it can become, in this season, the very thing that slows your entry into what has already been prepared. So part of what this message is doing is not just telling you that something is coming. It is preparing you to recognize it when it arrives and to receive it without the protective hesitation that the previous season made necessary. Let me describe specifically what is already beginning to move in 3 areas of your life, not in vague, general terms. In the specific, practical language of what you will actually experience as the season opens. The first area is your sense of internal knowing. Something is clarifying in you. You may have already noticed it in small ways, a thought that arrives with unusual certainty, a decision that used to feel impossible to make that suddenly has an obvious answer, a direction that used to feel foggy that is beginning to resolve into something clear enough to act on. This clarification is not random. It is the fruit of the kava process, the result of the braiding of the strands of your experience into a version of you that has the discernment to know what is true and what is noise. The internal knowing that the season eroded is returning, and it is returning not at the level it was before the season began, but at a depth and a precision that the season itself produced in you. What this will feel like in practical terms is this: you will begin to know things before you can explain how you know them. You will find yourself making decisions with a confidence that surprises even you, not because the external circumstances have given you more certainty, but because the internal compass has been recalibrated. Pay attention to what arrives in you with quiet certainty in the coming days and weeks. Do not dismiss it because it does not come with a full explanation. The knowing is trustworthy. The season prepared it, and what is coming through it now is the guidance that the next chapter requires you to act on. The second area is your relationships. And I want to be honest with you about what this is going to look like, because it is not always going to feel comfortable, even when it is right. Some of the people who have been in your life during this season are going to begin to feel further away. Not because anything dramatic happens, not because of conflict or falling out or sudden incompatibility, simply because the version of you that is emerging is oriented toward a different horizon than the one you shared with them during the waiting season. This is not a judgment on those people. This is the natural consequence of growth. When you change, the relational geometry around you changes with you. Some relationships will stretch to accommodate the new version of you and grow stronger in the stretching. Others will quietly contract and find their natural distance without requiring a dramatic ending. And at the same time, new people will begin to appear. They will arrive at what will feel like strange times and through unexpected channels. A conversation that should have been ordinary will go unexpectedly deep. A connection that should have been professional will carry a quality of recognition that feels more like reunion than introduction. These people are not accidents. They are part of the Kairos moment. They are arriving at the appointed time because you have been assembled into the flow version of yourself that can recognize them, receive them, and build with them in ways that the previous season did not make possible. Do not cling to what is contracting. Do not chase what is naturally finding its distance. And do not miss what is arriving because you are too focused on what is leaving. The relational landscape of your life is being reorganized by the same grace that reorganized your internal landscape. Trust the movement. The third area is the question of purpose, and specifically the question that has perhaps followed you more persistently than any other throughout this season. The question of what you are supposed to do, what your specific assignment is, what the calling that you have felt stirring in you for years is actually supposed to look like in practical, daily terms. This question has likely produced a great deal of frustration in the waiting season, because the answers seem to be always just out of reach. Clear enough to confirm that there was something, but not clear enough to act on with confidence. That is changing. And the way it is changing is not with a sudden dramatic lightning bolt revelation that answers everything at once. It is changing the way dawn changes the sky, gradually, persistently, and with a growing clarity that becomes undeniable before it becomes fully visible. You will begin to notice that certain things call your attention in ways that others do not, that certain needs in the world around you produce in you a response that feels like more than empathy, that certain opportunities, when they arise, create in you a resonance that is qualitatively different from the resonance of other opportunities. That is the calling clarifying, that is the purpose resolving from fog into form. Follow the resonance. It knows where it is going even when you do not yet have the full map. Now I want to speak to what not to do during this period, because the counsel on action is incomplete without the counsel on restraint. There are specific behaviors that are tempting in a transitional season and that can slow or complicate what is trying to move. Do not announce the shift before it has had time to establish itself. There is a temptation, when you feel something beginning to move after a long period of stillness, to tell everyone around you immediately, to perform the shift before it has had time to become real. Resist this. What is emerging in you right now needs a period of quiet consolidation before it is ready for public exposure. The seed does not announce itself before it has broken through the soil. Let the roots form first. Do not return to the old patterns simply because the new ones feel unfamiliar. Unfamiliarity is not a signal that you have made a wrong turn. It is a signal that you have left the territory of the previous season and entered the territory of the next one. New territory feels strange. Strange is not wrong. Stay with the strangeness long enough to let it become familiar. And do not negotiate your value downward to make other people more comfortable with your growth. One of the most insidious temptations of this transitional season is the temptation to shrink back into the version of yourself that the people around you are accustomed to, because the emerging version creates a dissonance in some of your existing relationships that feels socially uncomfortable. The discomfort is real, but the solution is not to make yourself smaller. The solution is to hold yourself with the steadiness and the gentleness that allows others time to adjust to who you are becoming. You can believe that everything is about to change, not because life is suddenly going to become effortless or pain-free or perfectly aligned with your preferences, but because the assembly is complete, the Kairos moment is open, and the movement that has already begun beneath the surface is going to become visible in the days and weeks ahead, in ways that will make the cost of the waiting season make sense in a way it has not made sense before. Something is already moving, and you are already inside the movement, whether you can feel it clearly yet or not. If you are sensing this, if something in you is recognizing the shift that is being described here and saying, yes, this is what I have been feeling, this is the season I am in, then I want you to type one word in the comments right now. Type the word receive, not as a transaction, as a declaration. Because there is something powerful that happens when you shift from asking to receiving, when you move from petition to acceptance, when you stop requesting what has already been granted and begin to open your hands to take hold of it. Type receive if this is your season. And while you are there, if this message has been companion to you in a moment when you needed one, consider sharing it with someone who is in their own transitional season and has not yet found the language for what they are living through. Your share is not a small thing. It is the way this message finds the next person who needs it most. Something is moving, and you are already in the movement. You are still here. And I want you to know that the fact that you are still here, that you have stayed with this message through every part of it, through the naming of the signs and the acknowledgement of the cost, and the reframing of the season and the description of what is already moving, that staying is not a small thing. Most people leave before the deepest part arrives. Most people consume the surface of a message and move on before it has had time to do what it was sent to do. But you stayed. And that staying tells me something about you that confirms everything this message has been saying since the first word. You are someone who is willing to go to the depth, someone who does not flinch from the full weight of a truth when it is offered, someone who has the interior capacity to receive not just the encouraging parts, but the honest parts, the costly parts, the parts that ask something of you rather than simply giving you something to feel good about. That capacity is not common, and it is not accidental. It was built in you by the season you have been living through, and it is one of the most important things you are bringing into what comes next. Not the talent, not the ambition, not the vision, as real and as significant as all of those things are. The capacity to stay, the capacity to go to the depth of a thing rather than skating across its surface. The capacity to hold complexity without collapsing it into something simpler and more comfortable. That is what the season built in you. And that is what the next chapter requires more than almost anything else. Now I want to give you something specific, a name for who you are becoming. Not a label in the limiting sense, not a category that reduces you, but a name in the ancient sense. The sense in which a name declares an identity, announces a calling, and marks a threshold that has been crossed. Because you are not the same person who entered this season. The braiding has changed you. The kairos has repositioned you. And the person who is standing at the threshold of what comes next deserves to be addressed by a name that reflects who they have become rather than who they were when the season began. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a peace carrier. Not in the passive sense of someone who simply avoids conflict or keeps the surface of things smooth. In the active, costly, deeply intentional sense of someone who has learned, through seasons of interior upheaval and exterior uncertainty, to carry something in their spirit that is not produced by circumstances and cannot be removed by them. A peace carrier is a person who has passed through enough turbulence to know that the only peace worth having is the kind that does not depend on everything going right. The kind that holds steady in the middle of the storm, not because the storm is not real, but because the anchor is deeper than the storm can reach. You became a peace carrier in this season, not by choosing peace in some abstract, philosophical way, but by being refined into it. By having every false piece stripped away one by one. Every piece that came from external validation, stripped. Every piece that came from having a clear plan and a predictable timeline, stripped. Every piece that came from being understood and approved of by the people around you, stripped. And what remained after all of that stripping was something quieter and more durable than any of those things. A piece that you did not manufacture. A piece that was formed in you through the process of learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, that your stability does not rest on the shifting ground of circumstances, but on something that circumstances cannot touch. That is not a small thing to carry into a new season. In fact, it may be the most important thing you carry. Because what is coming next will include moments of rapid movement, of doors opening faster than you expected, of opportunities arriving before you feel fully ready for them, of relationships deepening at a pace that requires you to stay grounded while everything around you is in motion. And the person who can move through all of that without losing their center, without being destabilized by the speed of the change after so long a period of stillness, that person is someone who has already been formed into a peace carrier. Someone whose anchor was set in the deep water of the long season and will hold steady in the fast current of the open one. A peace carrier is also something else. They are a person whose presence has a quality that others feel before they can explain it. You have likely experienced this without fully recognizing it as something specific to who you are. People are drawn to you in moments of their own difficulty, Not always because you have the right words, but because something in your presence offers them a ground to stand on that they cannot find elsewhere. Children settle in your company. Anxious people breathe more slowly around you. People in crisis reach for you not because you have all the answers, but because your presence communicates something that their nervous system receives as safe. That is not personality. That is not a social skill. That is the fruit of a person who has been through enough interior fire to carry a settled quality that the unrefined cannot produce. You are a peace carrier, and what you carry is not for you alone. It is one of the primary things you bring into the relationships, the assignments, the spaces, and the conversations that the new season is going to open to you. Wherever you go next, you will bring the capacity to hold steady when others cannot, to remain present when others flee, to offer ground when others are offering only more turbulence. That is a rare and irreplaceable gift, and it was forged in exactly the season you have been living through. Now I want to take you to the threshold, not as a concept, but as an experience. I want you to allow these words to create an interior space that you can actually inhabit for a moment. Not observe from a distance, but step into fully. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, a real doorway, solid and visible, with the frame on both sides of you and the floor beneath your feet carrying a quality of weight and significance that ordinary floors do not carry. The air around you is different from the air of an ordinary room. It is stiller. It is more intentional. It is the kind of air that exists in places where important things are about to happen. Now turn and look behind you. Let the looking be unhurried. What you see is the full landscape of the season you have been living through. Every difficult stretch. Every night that cost more than it should have. Every morning you showed up for, when showing up felt like the hardest possible thing. Every moment of private faithfulness that no one saw and no one applauded. Every time you chose to remain a peace carrier when everything in the circumstances was pressing you toward panic or bitterness or despair. See all of it, the whole terrain, honestly and without flinching. And now notice something important. Notice that everything you see on that side of the threshold, all of the difficulty and all of the cost and all of the long, quiet stretches of waiting, all of it ends here. At this threshold, the depletion stays behind you. The confusion stays behind you. The version of you that was learning, through repeated and sometimes brutal practice, how to carry peace in the middle of turbulence, that version has completed its work. What it learned does not stay behind. What it learned is the very thing that crosses the threshold with you. The peace is yours now. It was tested and it held, and it will hold again in everything that is coming. Now turn and look forward, through the threshold and into the territory on the other side. It is not fully visible yet, and that is exactly right, because the new territory reveals itself as you walk into it, rather than presenting itself all at once to a person who is still standing at the door. But what you can see is enough to take the step. There is space on the other side, real, open, breathable space. The kind of space that has not been available to you for a long time. Space for the full version of you to exist without contraction, without the constant management of the gap between who you are and what your circumstances have allowed you to express. That space is real, and it is already prepared. You are not approaching this threshold. You are standing on it. You have already arrived at the place you have been moving toward. The peace carrier does not need to earn the right to cross. The peace itself is the crossing. You carry it in you, which means you are already through the door in the only way that actually matters. Let me bless you now, in the quiet, unhurried, personal language of someone who means every word. May the peace you have carried through the long season continue to deepen now that the conditions around you are beginning to match it. May the people who need your specific kind of presence find their way to you with a precision that surprises you both. May the spaces you step into next be changed by the fact that you've walked into them, not because of anything you perform or produce, but simply because of what you carry. May your honor be seen by the right people at the right moment, in the way that changes what comes next for you and for everyone whose life intersects with yours. May the table being prepared in the presence of your enemies be set with a fullness that silences every voice that ever told you that you were too much, or not enough, or simply not the one. You are the one. You are a peace carrier, and what you carry has been waiting for a season wide enough to hold it. Step forward. The threshold is already under your feet. The threshold is already under your feet. That is where we left you, and that is exactly where you still are. Which means this part of the message is not asking you to go somewhere new. It is asking you to look clearly at where you already are and to understand, in practical and specific terms, what it means to begin walking forward from this exact position. The blessing of the threshold is real, and the naming of who you have become is real, and the declaration that your season is turning is real. But none of it becomes lived experience without the daily practical, grounded choices that translate spiritual reality into material movement. And that translation is what this part of the message is entirely about. What do you actually do right now? Not in the abstract, not in the grand visionary sense of what your life will look like in 3 years when everything has shifted. Right now. Today. In the hours between when this message ends and when you lay your head down tonight. What are the specific, practical, immediately available actions that align you with the movement that has already begun and that position you to receive, recognize, and respond to what the open season is releasing toward you? I want to give you 3 areas of transformation that are already in motion and the specific practical posture that each area requires from you right now. Not next month, not when the circumstances look more favorable. Right now, in whatever condition you are currently in, with whatever resources you currently have, in whatever space you are currently occupying. The first area is relationships, and the practical instruction here is both simpler and more difficult than it might initially appear. The simplest version of it is this. Stop holding on to what is already leaving, and stop closing your hands against what is already arriving. That sounds straightforward until you are actually in the middle of it, because the relationships that are naturally finding their distance in this transitional season are often ones that have been part of your life for a significant amount of time. They are familiar. They carry history and the pull to maintain them at their previous level of closeness. Even when something in you knows that the season of that closeness has passed, is a powerful pull. It feels like loyalty. It feels like gratitude. It feels like the right thing to do for someone who was present during a difficult chapter of your life. But there is a difference between honoring a relationship and holding it hostage to a season it has already completed. You can be grateful for what someone was to you in the waiting season without requiring that they occupy the same position in the open season. You can love someone and allow the natural reorganization of the relational geometry to happen without forcing either a dramatic ending or an artificial continuation. Let the relationships that need to breathe find their natural distance. Release them with gratitude and without guilt. And as you do, notice what arrives in the space that opens up, because new people are already moving toward you. This is not a metaphor. In the coming days and weeks, pay attention to the connections that carry an unusual quality of recognition. The conversation that goes unexpectedly deep. The person who seems to understand something about you that you have not yet said. The connection that feels less like meeting someone new and more like recognizing someone whose arrival you were somehow already expecting. These connections are not random. They are Kairos connections, arriving at the appointed time, carrying the specific kind of companionship, collaboration, and mutual recognition that the new season requires. Do not let the habit of relational caution that the previous season produced in you cause you to hold them at a distance. Open your hands. Let the new arrive. The practical action for today in the area of relationships is this. Identify one person in your life who has been trying to connect with you more deeply and whom you have been, perhaps unconsciously, keeping at a slight distance out of the protective habit of the waiting season. Reach back toward them, not dramatically. A message, a question, an invitation for a conversation. One small movement of opening in the direction of a connection that is ready to deepen. That is enough. That single action plants something that the new season will grow. The second area is purpose, and here the practical instruction is equally specific. The question of what you are supposed to do, the question that has followed you through the waiting season with such persistence and such frustration, is beginning to answer itself. Not all at once, not with a thunderclap of divine clarity that eliminates every ambiguity at once, but in the way that dawn answers the question of whether morning is coming, gradually, persistently, with a growing light that makes more and more visible what was previously obscured. And the practical action that aligns you with the answering of that question is this. Stop waiting for the full answer before you take the first step. This is perhaps the most common and most costly mistake that people make in transitional seasons. They wait for complete clarity before they move, not understanding that clarity in a new season is not a prerequisite for movement. It is a product of movement. You do not receive the full map before you begin walking. You receive the next step, and when you take the next step, the step after that becomes visible, and so on, until what felt like impossible obscurity has become a path that you can see clearly enough to walk with confidence. So the practical action for today in the area of purpose is this. Identify the one thing that has been pulling at your attention with the quality of resonance rather than obligation. Not the thing you feel you should do. The thing that, when you imagine yourself doing it, produces a response in you that is qualitatively different from the response produced by everything else. That resonance is the signal. It is the frequency of your calling making contact with your awareness. Follow it one step, not the whole journey. One step. Write something down. Make one phone call. Research one thing. Take one action that moves you from the position of waiting for clarity to the position of someone who is already in motion toward it. That single step will do more to clarify your purpose than another month of waiting and wondering ever could. The third area is resources and opportunities. And this is where I want to speak most carefully, because the previous season may have trained you into a posture around resources that served you in the scarcity of the waiting, but will limit you in the abundance of the open season. The posture I am describing is the posture of fighting for what you need, of straining, of working harder and pushing further and exhausting yourself in the pursuit of things that always seem to require more effort than they should. That posture was understandable in a season where resources felt tight and opportunities felt scarce. But it is not the posture of the open season. And if you carry it forward without examination, it will cause you to work against the very movement that is trying to bring what is yours toward you. The posture of the open season is not passivity. Let me be clear about that. It is not sitting down and waiting for things to fall into your lap. It is the posture of someone who is confidently aligned with what is moving toward them, who takes clear and purposeful action without the frantic energy of someone who believes that if they stop straining for even a moment, everything will fall apart. There is a difference between purposeful action and desperate striving. And the peace carrier that you have become in this season is someone who has the capacity to act from the former rather than the latter. What this looks like practically is this. In the coming days, when an opportunity presents itself, resist the urge to immediately calculate all the ways it might not work out. Resist the first impulse to identify the catch, the hidden cost, the reason this is probably not as good as it looks. That impulse was useful in a season where discernment was necessary to protect you from things that looked like opportunities but were not. But it can become, in the open season, a reflex that causes you to talk yourself out of things that are genuinely meant for you. Instead, when an opportunity arrives, ask one question. Does this carry peace? Not excitement necessarily, not certainty, not the absence of all risk. Peace. The specific quality of settled rightness that a peace carrier has been trained to recognize because they have carried it through seasons where nothing else was available. If the answer is yes, move toward it. If the answer is no, let it pass without guilt. That single question, applied consistently, will become one of the most reliable navigational tools you have in the open season. And I want to add something about resources specifically, about finances, about provision, about the practical material reality of what it means to live in an open season after a long season of constraint. The provision that is coming toward you in this season is not contingent on your ability to figure out exactly how it will arrive. It is not dependent on you having identified all of the right channels and all of the right strategies and all of the right people. It is moving toward you through paths that you have not yet seen and through connections that have not yet been made and through opportunities that have not yet presented themselves. Your job is to manufacture the provision. Your job is to stay aligned with the frequency of the open season, to take the practical steps that are available to you today, and to hold your hands open rather than closed. What is yours is coming toward you, not because you finally figured out the right formula, because the appointed time has arrived and the preparation is complete, and the kairos of this season is releasing toward you what was always written with your name on it. The practical summary of this part of the message is this. In relationships, open toward what is arriving and release what is naturally finding its distance. In purpose, take one step in the direction of the resonance without waiting for the full map. In resources, act from peace rather than striving, and trust that what is moving toward you is already in motion. These three actions, taken today, in whatever form is available to you today, are not small things dressed up in encouraging language. They are the specific, practical, ground-level movements of a person who has understood that the threshold is already under their feet, and that walking forward from it is not a future event to be prepared for, but a present choice to be made. Make the choice today. The open season is already here, and what is yours is already moving toward you. Type the word open in the comments if something as part of the message landed in a place that needed it. Just one word. But let it be a declaration rather than a response. Let it be your announcement to the season that you are ready to receive what it is releasing. You are not asking anymore. You are opening, and that is a different posture entirely. You made it to the end. And I want to hold that for a moment, before anything else is said. Because the fact that you are still here, that you listened through every part of this message, through the naming and the acknowledgement, and the reframing, and the blessing, and the practical instruction, that is not nothing. That is everything. Because the person who makes it to the end of a message like this one is not the casual consumer. They are the one who knew, somewhere beneath the surface of their rational mind, that something in this message was meant specifically for them. And they stayed because leaving felt like leaving something important behind. You stayed, and that staying is itself a declaration. It is the declaration of a person who is done with the surface and ready for the depth, done with the managed version of themselves and ready for the full version, done with the waiting posture and ready for the receiving posture. I want to thank you, not in the polite, performative way that closes out a video, in the genuine, specific way that I mean when I say it. Thank you for showing up here, because I know what it costs to show up when you are tired. I know what it requires to stay present to a message about hope when hope has been a complicated relationship for you. I know that the part of you that clicked play today is not the part that has everything figured out and is looking for confirmation. It is the part that has been holding on, sometimes barely, sometimes with more grace than you were given credit for, and that needed someone to name what it has been carrying. I hope this message did that. I hope something in these words found the place in you that needed finding and sat with it long enough to make a difference. You are not alone in this season. I need you to hear that, not as a comfort phrase, but as a literal geographic, right now reality. All across the world, in time zones you will never share, and in languages you may not speak, other chosen ones are listening to this exact message at this exact moment in their own journeys. They are sitting in their cars on lunch breaks in cities you have never visited. They are lying on their beds in the quiet hours of the night, in countries you have never been to. They are standing in their kitchens in the early morning, before the rest of the house wakes up, stealing 7 minutes of silence and prayer and the specific kind of hope that only arrives when you have been honest about how much you needed it. They are all here. They are all carrying what you are carrying. They are all standing at the same threshold that you are standing at. And not one of them arrived here by accident. Just like you. You are in a room right now that is far more populated than it appears. The chosen ones who are walking into this same message today, in this same season, with this same combination of weariness and faith, and the stubborn refusal to stop believing that the promise is real even when the evidence has been slow in arriving. They are your companions. You cannot see them, but they are there, and you are there for them too. Your presence in this room is part of what makes the room real for someone else who needed to know they were not the only one. Now, I want to give you one final exercise before this message closes. And this one is perhaps the most important of all, because it is the one that determines whether everything you have heard today stays in the category of beautiful content or crosses the threshold into actual lived transformation. I want you to lay down the burden, not metaphorically, as specifically and as physically as language can make it. I want you to picture, right now, everything you have been carrying in this season. All of the weight of it, the grief, the unanswered questions, the cost of the years, the relationships that did not go the way you hoped, the career that has not yet arrived at the place you know it is headed, the faith that has been stretched so thin in certain moments that it felt like it might not survive another disappointment. The private version of your story that you have never told anyone in its entirety because you were not sure the full weight of it would be received well. Picture all of it gathered together. Give it a shape if you need to. A bag, a stone, a stack of things that you have been carrying with both arms for longer than your arms were designed to hold that weight. Feel the actual physical sensation of having carried something heavy for a very long time. The ache of it, the tiredness of it, the way it has shaped the posture of your body and the posture of your spirit over the months and years of carrying it. And now picture the threshold again, the one you have been standing on throughout this message. The doorway between the waiting season and the open season, between the season of being overlooked and the season of having your honor seen, between the season of the desert and the season of the table being set in the presence of your enemies. I want you to walk to that threshold, and at the threshold, I want you to set the burden down. Not throw it, not hurl it away in anger or rejection. Set it down, gently, respectfully, because what you have been carrying deserves to be carried with care, and setting it down deserves the same care. Place it at the threshold, leave it there, and then step forward. You do not need it on the other side. Everything that the burden contained that was worth carrying forward, the wisdom, the depth, the compassion, the character, the peace, all of it has already been absorbed into who you have become. It is already in you. The bag is empty of what mattered and heavy only with what you no longer need. Leave it at the threshold. Step forward without it. And notice what it feels like to walk without that weight for the first time in a very long time. That lightness is not irresponsibility. It is not naivety. It is not the lightness of someone who has forgotten what the season cost. It is the lightness of someone who has been fully formed by the season and is now free to move into what the season prepared them for without the dead weight of what no longer belongs to them. Walk forward, light, ready, assembled, at peace. Now, before this message closes, I want to ask you something. If these words found you today in a moment when you needed to be found, if something in this message named what you have been carrying in a way that made you feel less alone and more clear about who you are and what is coming, would you do something for me that is not actually for me at all? Like this video. Not as a transaction, as an act of solidarity with the next person who is going to scroll past this and wonder if it is worth their time. Your like is the signal that tells them, yes, someone like me sat with this and it was worth the time. Share this message with one person, just one. The person who came to your mind at some point during this message, the one you thought of when we talked about the long season of waiting. The one who has been carrying something heavy and has not yet found the language for it. Send it to them without a long explanation. Just send it. Let the message do what the message was designed to do. It's good to this channel. Not because content is a product you are purchasing, but because this is a community of chosen ones who are walking through their seasons together and staying connected to the community means that the next message, the one that was written for the next moment in your journey, will find you when it arrives. And if you are in a position to give, if something moved in you during this message in a way that makes you want to invest in its continuation, the donation link is in the description below. Not for me, so that this message can reach the person who is waking up tomorrow morning into another Monday without anyone to name what they are carrying. Your generosity is not a transaction. It is a transmission. It is you saying that this matters enough to keep in the world. And it does matter. It matters more than the numbers will ever fully capture. And one more thing. If the genius wave found you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the part about the 7 minutes and the brain frequency and the science of alignment landed in a place that felt like recognition rather than information, if something in you said yes when Dr. Rivers' work was described, then you already know whether it is a yes for you. You do not need more time to decide. The Genius Wave is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. At $39, with a 90-day money-back guarantee, and with lifetime access to the 7-minute practice that has the potential to shift the frequency at which you are operating in every area of your daily life. If it is a yes, the link is there, and it will be there when you are ready. This is where this message ends, but it is not where your story ends. Your story is entering one of its most significant chapters right now, in this season, with this breath, with this choice to lay down the burden and walk forward light. The table is being prepared. Your honor is about to be seen. The enemies who doubted you and dismissed you and counted you out are about to witness something that they will not have the language for. Because what God prepares for a chosen one who has held on through the long season is always beyond what the doubters imagined was possible. You held on, and the holding on has brought you here, to this threshold, to this message, to this moment of arrival that has been moving toward you through every single day of the waiting season. Walk forward. The table is ready, and your name is on it. You have stayed until the very end, and that means something that no algorithm can measure and no metric can capture. Before you close this out and return to your day, let this land softly in the place that is still listening. You are seen, not by the crowd, not by the numbers, not by the people who have not yet recognized what you carry, but by the one who ordained the season, designed the preparation, and set the table. You are not walking back into your week the same person who pressed play. Something has shifted. Something has been named. Something has been released, and something has been received. Carry it gently. Carry it with the steady, quiet confidence of a peace carrier who knows that what is moving toward them is already in motion. May every step take from this threshold be lighter than the last. May your honor be seen exactly when it is needed most. And may the table prepared before you be more abundant than anything the waiting season allowed you to imagine. Go well, chosen one. You are exactly where you are supposed to be.